Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, Good Mobility Summit. What excites me about mobility is it has the potential to change the way we work. A lot of people talk about cloud as a centre of innovation, and indeed it is. But mobility, on the other hand, gives us the opportunity to cast away all the legacy processes that we're used to, legacy technology, to adopt new ways of doing things, new apps, new ways of interfacing with computers. That's what really excites me about being at events like this. So we're talking about strategies for mobile engagement, and I'll start by giving an overview of general industry trends, and then we'll talk about BYOD, BYOA, and app development and so forth. If you look at high-speed networks in Australia, about 50% of us will be using 4G by 2015. Combine this with the proliferation of Wi-Fi, we have a lot of high-speed options now for connecting to the internet and using our applications with our mobile devices. 80% of organisation owned, and I stress this, mobile handsets are now smartphones. So we saw the smartphone revolution happen in the consumer space, but that hasn't stopped businesses now from doing their own procurement of smartphones. Cost savings remains the biggest reason organisations allow BYOD. So to bring your own device is seen as a big cost saver for a lot of corporates. 84% of organisations have ICT processes in place for people to become a mobile worker. And that's kind of one of the social changes that we're seeing with mobility, in addition to all the technology. Bring your own apps, BYOA is now in 2/3 of enterprises here in Australia. And that's interesting, we'll talk a bit about that later. But there is a lot of talk about BYOD, and that's sort of, people using their own devices for work purposes, being able to keep in touch with the latest technology. But people often overlook that the applications that arrive on the devices are actually going to be more strategic than the devices themselves, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the amount of Australian enterprises developing mobile applications has doubled in the last 12 months. So as John was talking about, there are ways in which you can develop mobile applications and then handle the life cycle of that application. That is going to be more strategic for a lot of organisations, in addition to all the public apps that are available. 50% of sales staff now regularly work from a remote location outside the home or office. So we're seeing, that is another social trend where people want to be able to work where it suits them, when it suits them. Penetration of enterprise-like apps, CRM, ERP, is now higher on tablets than smartphones. So the tablet experience for these type of enterprise apps is winning out. MDM, penetration more than doubled in Australia in the last 12 months. So, it's certainly top of mind. Mind you, there are more unmanaged devices out there than managed devices, but MDM is growing. It's a very fast-growing market. Android has made its mark on the enterprise. Remember when the smartphone revolution happened, that it was all about iOS and the iPhone? Well, Android is sneaking its way up and now supported by nearly half of enterprises. iOS is still ahead though. And 36% of organisations let IT decide which apps are locked down on devices. Okay, so which personal apps, and we'll talk about strategies for locking down apps and so forth in a minute. I just want to take a moment to consider how the devices that we use has changed over recent years. Now we track post-PC devices since post-PC devices arrived, and if you look at that big blue line that's heading downward, that's regular phones. So people aren't using regular mobile phones anymore. They're more engaged with smartphones, tablets, post-PC devices. If you look at the PC penetration rate, it's pretty stable. So that hasn't changed a lot. But the big growth area is tablets and smartphones. It's interesting. The way in which people have used devices has changed a lot, so much so that they often become extinct. Many years ago, I interviewed the CEO of Palm Corporation, and I asked him, well, what's the future of the PDA? The company sold both PDAs and smartphones. So it had a smartphone operating system, smartphone device, and apps way back when. And he said to me, well, I think there's going to be room for both in the market. Will everyone please take out their PDA and hold it in the air? Not one. So there's no room for PDAs in the market anymore? It doesn't take a billionaire venture capitalist to realise that software is eating the world, where software will eat a device where it makes sense. So a simple PDA, maybe a simple camera or a music player, then yes, the software in the form of an app on a smart device will make that device obsolete. Now if you look at the evolution of IT architecture, it can be basically summarised into four main paradigm shifts, if you like. We had centralised computing, where it was mainframes tied to the office, you access through terminals. Then went through a client-server revolution, where there's Windows desktop, so you had PCs and LANs and so forth. And then the market really opened up into the personal computing paradigm where everyone started getting PCs and notebooks at home, using the internet and so forth. And now we're really in the mobile cloud paradigm. And what this means, it doesn't take away from everything else that's become before it, but the mobile cloud paradigm is enabling different ways to manage IT outside the traditional sort of corporate network style of architecture. So we have, smartphones where people can download public apps. We have, apps available, rich apps available through our web browsers that we didn't have before. So that requires a new way of thinking about mobile data management, both on the device, on the client device that we interface with, as well as the cloud service that is hosted perhaps locally or anywhere in the world. So we don't need to control the environment. And what's different about every change in the paradigm shift is that as IT matured, the barrier to entry became a lot lower. So you don't need the barrier to entry to a smartphone and cloud service is very low, whereas I'm sure you perhaps all familiar with the cost of mainframes and so forth. So that just sets the scene about where we're heading with mobile and cloud. And if you look at the fast lane of mobile engagement, this slide really takes from when the iPhone first appeared, what sort of transitions happened in the type of post-PD devices and where we're headed. So if you look at tablets that came onto the scene, smartphones, Android, now where to now? Wearables, Internet of Things, how will they be used by business? How can we make sure that, given the old PDA example, that we're not left with legacy equipment along the way? The amount of device technology change is very, very rapid. So how do we develop a mobile engagement strategy that's not dependent on any one particular device or even the change in those devices? How are we going to, I was talking to someone earlier about wearable computers in the workplace, and it's all great to say that you can use something like Google Glass in the workplace, but is that ruggedized? Will it be suitable for what they call hot work environments where it could cause a fire and so forth? So these things need to be taken into account when new devices appear on the market. Internet of Things, John mentioned that it was a Linux-powered fridge that was part of a denial of service attack. That kind of gives a new meaning to security freeze, doesn't it? So I couldn't resist that joke. And social apps. So more of our applications are adding social capabilities. So how do we make sure that for our mobile engagement strategy that we're not left behind? I think we need to focus on using devices and their capabilities for what we need them for, but really focus on our applications, our software, security, and making sure that it's available. So we need application access, we need data access, we need to secure our information. We have tactical solutions like MDM available to remote wipe and so on and so forth. But just keep an eye on the advanced technologies. We don't actually need to hedge all our bets on a particular wearable computer. If our architecture for mobile engagement enables our software and applications to be accessible on most devices, then we can use point solutions as they appear. Now, as I mentioned before, post-PD devices are growing, and in the Australian enterprise market, they're actually starting to impact tablet PCs, impacting regular PCs, right? So we have, organisations are delaying or perhaps even stop purchasing PCs because of tablets, and this is an interesting trend. If organisations are, not buying as many PCs, how are they going to make sure that their applications are accessible and usable on tablets? Okay, so that ties into mobile engagement strategy. Most businesses in Australia want connected devices, so they want the ability to be able to use 3G and 4G high-speed data services in addition to Wi-Fi. Right? Again, it's a cultural thing, so we want to be able to work anywhere we can, not just have to find an access point anywhere. We want to be able to work in an airport or anywhere on the road. And in Australia, teleworking is actually past 40% of organisations. So, we asked our CIO respondents, does your organisation have any staff that work from home? At least one day a week. And turns out there are what? Who in this room works from home? Quite a few of you, right? So, I do it myself. I'd rather be able to work anywhere. I want to be productive anywhere. I don't want to be tied down to an office environment on a PC. Okay, I want to be able to use my own device, use corporate applications, personal applications, as well as being able to work from any location. And we asked our CIO survey respondents what they thought about BYOD and how that ties to mobility enablement. It turns out that mobility enablement is ahead of BYOD culture. I've highlighted the BYOD computing culture as being low, it's low on the scale for organisations who think they have the right, technology and processes in place for people to become a mobile worker. They don't see BYOD as that compelling. They like to think that they have the networks and security and mobile broadband, so on and so forth in place. Whether they do or not, it remains to be seen, but they think that BYOD computing culture is low on the scale. Multi-platform strategies are gaining ground, and this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, is that we know that devices are always changing, they're always rapidly evolving. We may not even be able to keep up with the rapid pace of device development, but if we have mobile engagement strategies that are inherently multi-platform, at least then we're positioned well enough to say, okay, we know a new device is coming out, has this capability, and we can run these applications on it. But it still needs to be, that application still needs to be accessible on a desktop or a tablet or a mobile device or a smartphone. So you see what I'm saying? Do people agree that multi-platform strategies are the way of the future? Anyone looking at multi-platform strategies? Yeah. Who isn't? No? You? You don't believe in multi-platform strategies? No? You're sticking one device? Okay, so you've got a smartphone and a Mac. You don't want them to talk to each other? No? Same platform? Okay, that's interesting. Because as I was saying earlier, you can certainly have one platform, whether it's a mobile, desktop, or from one vendor. But and we'll talk about this in a minute, so if BYOD, if people come into your organisation and they're using other types of devices, how do you service them? So there's those sort of things that need to be considered. Because BYOD is now approaching 70% penetration amongst Australian enterprises, and that's quite a large penetration, And what I've highlighted there is that a lot of organisations don't have BYOD policies as such, but they're aware, their CIOs are aware that staff go ahead and do it anyway. So there's this shadow. Go ahead, sir.
Sorry, is that large corporations or all corporations?
Large corporations, a minimum 20 employees, so up to 2,000 plus. So we have policies of BYOD in place, but all CIOs recognise that staff go ahead and do it anyway. And about 30%, in terms of the organisations that allow or tolerate BYOD, 30% of staff bringing their own, actually using it, bringing their own device into the workplace. So this is it's a key trend, and these devices here will be at the cutting edge. So these people will bring their wearable computers into the workplace. They will be the next generation tablets. They will bring smartphones, so on and so forth. Biggest reason, I mentioned this at the start, biggest reason is cost, but here I've highlighted productivity improvements, better access to new technology, and employee demands as key to what CIOs think is the biggest reason for BYOD, for having a BYOD policy in their workplace. What do people think about less IT support requirements? It's there, but it's not, high up on the scale. Attracting younger staff, we talk about generational change and so forth. And then lastly, is it a requirement for our business? So there are only a few businesses that actually demand BYOD. But productivity improvement, better access to new technology, and employee demands are three key reasons that I've highlighted in addition to cost. In terms of an organisation's approach to BYOD, email access is key. Email seems to be still that killer app for mobile devices. But I've highlighted allowing access to work files. And I think that's a growing area because traditionally, if you look at the separation between remember I mentioned the computing paradigm shifts, the separation between PC, LAN, and personal computing to the post-PC era and mobile devices, access to work files and access to corporate applications has been one of those areas that organisations have traditionally struggled with. There are ways in which they can mobilise enterprise apps. There are ways in which you can use tools now to connect to file hosting services like SharePoint and so forth. So that is becoming key as part of their BYOD strategy or their approach to BYOD. And in addition to that, access to corporate directory is key as well, and running enterprise applications via the web. So there's sort of some of the things that are top of mind with CIOs for their approach to BYOD strategies and so forth. BYO app control is becoming a business priority. If you look at 9% of organisations are controlling both business and personal apps, but the majority that control business apps are not personal apps, 42%. And that's something that's going to tie in with the whole personal app revolution, with people wanting to use public apps, BYOA, for work purposes. Okay, I think that is probably in line for some change for a number of reasons. I think what will happen is we'll see more integration of public apps with corporate systems, and also we'll see, organisations taking on more of what's available out there and wanting to secure it and make it available on different devices. In terms of BYOD outlook or support, market's kind of split. It's like, most 58% of organisations have no plans to support it. But having said that, it's still growing fast. Anything that's growing like 35% plan to support it within 2 years, it still indicates a strong growth rate. Who's planning to support BYOD if you don't already do? Not many, few people around. So a lot will depend on, we've got a confluence of social impacts, so people want to bring their personal devices into the workplace, the tools that are available to manage personal devices and secure them, so that's another aspect, and just generally the organisation's willingness to adopt BYOD. Now, in terms of mobile apps, more than, double the amount of organisations in Australia actually developing mobile apps now, and this is quite an exciting trend. Do you develop an app, as John was saying, do you develop an app, or do you use a public app that's available? Do you wait for a vendor to provide a mobile form-factored application for your devices? And when you develop your own apps, you still don't get away from the problem of multiple device support, the problem of application lifecycle management, the problem of security, so on and so forth. But the good news is, it's a way of managing your information perhaps more efficiently than you would have done before. How many organisations had developed a PC app that was only tied to their ecosystem of client server? Now we're developing mobile apps, it really changes the game. As I mentioned, mobility has the opportunity to change our workflows, the way we bring our information out to remote locations and manage it back centrally or through a cloud service. And if you look at, the market is quite split between developing internal apps for internal business processes as well as external, which might for a marketing need, for example. There's some organisations that have even chosen one mobile platform to develop an internal app, say for internal performance reviews or something like that, and that platform might be on, say, Windows Phone. And if you're developing something for external marketing or for external customer engagement, you might choose another platform, something like Android or iOS, that is generally more available than Windows Phone. When we look at mobile applications, as I said, email is still number one for smartphones. That's like it's still the killer app. But instant messaging, three-way conferencing and communication. So the communication-centric apps are really top for, these are corporate applications on mobile devices. But there's a whole spectrum of applications that can improve the productivity and go a long way to engaging a workforce with mobile devices, be it office productivity, rules, security, note-taking, video conferencing, so on and so forth, backups, GPS. So the market is just ripe for taking what you would have had in the corporate space, spanning it out to a mobile, either through your own custom apps, public apps, or apps provided by specialist vendors.